I never thought I'd be the woman who would arrive at a family reunion in a helicopter, but life has a way of proving people wrong. 3 years ago, they called me a failure from Detroit who wasn't good enough for their precious son. Today, I'm the CEO of a fintech company empowering 2 million women to reclaim their financial future. And the look on my mother-in-law's face when I stepped onto that lawn in a tailored green suit while the blade still spun behind me, that was worth every sleepless night I spent building my empire. Have you ever dreamed of a moment like that? Stick around because this is how it happened. They laughed at me during the family reunion, called me a failure. They didn't know 3 years later they would have to look up at me. My name is Sienna Carter, and I grew up in a crumbling apartment complex on the east side of Detroit. The kind with peeling paint, loud neighbors, and the scent of fried food drifting through thin walls every evening. My dad died when I was 13, a heart attack on the city bus he drove for 20 years. My mom worked nights as a nurse until cancer took her 3 years later, leaving me to finish high school while working at the corner store to pay for lights and rent. I learned to survive, to stretch $20 for a week of groceries, to wake up at 4 a.m. for a diner shift before class at the community college down the street. I didn't have the luxury of dreaming big. I just needed to get through each day without falling apart. I met Noah Whitmore at a networking event in Manhattan, a scholarship trip. I scraped together enough to attend wearing a thrift store blazer and shoes that pinched my toes. He stood there with a quiet confidence, a soft laugh, and eyes that made me feel seen in a room full of people who didn't care if I existed. Noah came from a world I had only seen on television. His family owned a financial firm in Connecticut, the kind with generations of lawyers and politicians, with summer homes in Cape Cod and memberships at country clubs where no one looked like me. But when Noah talked about wanting to do more than collect paychecks, about using money to help people who never had a chance, I believed him. I didn't fall for Noah because he came from money. I fell because he believed in a future I barely let myself hope for. When Noah asked me to come to his family's annual reunion in Connecticut, I said yes, hoping they would see who I was beyond the cheap degree and the darker skin. They would surely notice the second I stepped onto their perfect lawn. I took the bus to Grand Central, then a train to New Haven, clutching a worn leather bag and a simple blue dress I bought with my last tip money. I straightened my hair the night before, my hands shaking as I burned my fingers, wanting to look like the women they would expect. The Whitmore estate was massive, a white house with dark shutters, green lawns that stretched into the woods, and a driveway lined with maple trees that whispered in the breeze. I stood there, suitcase in hand, while Noah hugged me, whispering, "They'll love you." Evelyn Whitmore met me at the front steps, her eyes cool and assessing, her pearls shining against her pale skin. She reached out to shake my hand, her grip firm, her smile tight. "So you're Sienna," she said. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, forcing a small smile. "And you're from Detroit, correct?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, ma'am," I repeated, my voice steady. Her smile faltered for a breath before returning, wider but colder. "How quaint." They led me into the house where laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, where cousins in pastel dresses and men in pressed slacks glanced at me with polite curiosity that felt like a spotlight I couldn't escape. At dinner, Evelyn made sure I sat next to her at the long table. The room smelled of roasted lamb and expensive wine. I placed my cloth napkin on my lap, careful with the silverware I didn't know how to use, hoping no one would notice. Evelyn lifted her glass, tapping it lightly for attention. The chatter quieted and she smiled at me. "It's important," she said, looking around the table, "for young women to know their place. To understand the value of finding security, especially when their backgrounds might leave them lacking." A laugh slipped from the cousin across from me. Another uncle cleared his throat, looking down into his glass. My face burned as I stared at Evelyn, who tilted her head, her eyes sharp as a blade. Noah shifted beside me. His hand brushed mine under the table, but he didn't say a word. I swallowed, forcing the tears down my nails, digging into my palm under the tablecloth. I smiled, a small, tight smile, and nodded because I didn't know what else to do. They called me a failure to my face, and Noah, the man I thought would protect me, said nothing. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, the moonlight slicing through the curtains, washing over the soft, perfect carpet under my feet. I stared at the ceiling, hearing their laughter echo in my ears. I promised myself I would never let them make me feel small again. But I didn't know then that the fight to claim my worth would begin with betrayal from the one person I trusted the most. The morning after that dinner, I stood at the window looking out at the mist over the Whitmore lawn. Noah knocked softly before stepping in, coffee in his hand, dark circles under his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. For what I didn't turn from the window. For what she said. For not saying anything. I finally looked at him, and he looked like a child, lost and afraid. I wanted to yell to tell him he should have stood up for me, should have told them I wasn't some charity case he dragged in from the street. Instead, I nodded once because I didn't have the energy to fight him too. "They'll come around, Sienna," he said, like he believed it. "Will they?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He stepped closer, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. "I need to go home," I said. He opened his mouth, searching for words, but nothing came. I packed my small bag, the dress folded carefully, the shoes that pinched shoved into the side pocket. The drive to the station was quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy, thick between us. I watched the trees blur past, the world outside bright and cold, while inside I felt something harden in my chest. When we pulled up, Noah finally spoke. "I love you, Sienna." I looked at him, his hands gripping the wheel knuckles, white eyes glassy. "I know," I said. "But love isn't enough." I stepped out, closing the door softly, the cold biting at my skin as I walked to the platform, the bag heavy on my shoulder. The train back to the city rattled as it moved, the sound a comfort against the thoughts racing in my mind. I stared at the reflection in the window, the woman looking back at me, tired but alive. I thought about my mother working those double shifts, saving every penny, teaching me to keep my head up no matter who tried to bring it down. I thought about the nights I stayed up studying, trying to prove to myself that I was worth something. They called me a failure. Maybe I was in their world. But I decided that day I would never beg for a seat at their table again. I would build my own. When I got back to my small apartment, the city noise buzzing outside, I dropped my bag and let out a breath. I changed into sweatpants, pulled my hair back, and sat at my kitchen table with a pen and a notebook. I started writing. Ideas. Plans. A way to help women like me take control of their money, to teach them how to fight back in a world that wanted them to fail. An app, maybe. Classes. A platform to give women the knowledge I had to claw for, piece by piece. I didn't know how I would do it, but I knew I would. That night Noah called. I let it ring. He texted, "Please talk to me." I turned off my phone. For the first time in a long time, I chose me. I lay in bed, the hum of the heater in the background, the city lights flickering through the blinds. My heart still ached, but under the pain was something new. Fire. If they wanted me to fail, they would have to watch me fight first. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because the war for my worth was just beginning. And the betrayal that would ignite it was closer than I ever imagined. They told Noah to choose between his family or me. I never expected the choice he made. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning. I was sipping cheap coffee in my small kitchen, flipping through notes for the fintech idea that kept me up at night, when my phone buzzed. "Sienna, it's Richard Whitmore." My breath caught. Noah's father had never called me directly. "I assume you know the position you've put my son in." I swallowed, gripping the edge of the counter. "I don't understand, sir." He sighed like I was a burden. "If you love Noah, truly love him, you will let him go." My mind went blank, the words ringing in my ear. "He has a future, Sienna, a legacy to protect," Richard continued. "Do not ruin that because you are clinging to something that will never be yours." I hung up without another word, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. I stared at the cracked tile floor, the sunlight slanting through the window, warming nothing. Noah didn't know about the call, or if he did, he didn't say. Instead, he started coming home later from work at the Whitmore firm. His shoulders tense, eyes tired, the weight of their expectations pressing him down. We barely spoke during those weeks. I stayed late at the library after my teller job, researching fintech accelerators and community banking laws, scribbling notes into my journal, trying to build a path for women like me to escape the cycle of debt and fear. But every night when I unlocked the door, Noah would be there, sitting on the couch looking at me like he wanted to speak but didn't know how. One evening, I found an envelope slid under my door, no return address. Inside were printed photos, grainy but clear enough, of me meeting with a mentor from the accelerator program at a coffee shop, shaking hands, laughing. A yellow sticky note was attached. "Does Noah know about your little meetings?" I sat down hard, the envelope slipping from my hands. My stomach twisted. I knew immediately who sent it. Evelyn Whitmore. She had hired someone to follow me, to dig into my life, to make it look like I was cheating, like I was exactly what she called me at that table, a gold digger looking for her next mark. Noah came home that night, dropping his keys on the table, glancing at me, sitting on the floor with the photos spread around me. "What's all this?" he asked, stepping closer. I looked up at him, eyes burning. "Your mother sent these." His face fell, color draining. "Sienna, she's trying to make you leave me." "Noah," I said, my voice trembling but steady. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "I didn't know she would do this." "Yes, you did." I snapped, standing up, holding one of the photos out to him. "You knew exactly what she thinks of me." He didn't deny it, just looked at the photo, his jaw tightening, eyes glossing over with a pain I almost recognized. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I shook my head, stepping back. "You let them treat me like trash. You let them laugh at me." He opened his mouth, closed it again, and sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I turned away, my heart pounding, tears slipping down my cheeks as I stared out the window at the lights of Queens, the rumble of the subway in the distance grounding me. I knew in that moment I would never beg for Noah to fight for me. If I wanted to build something, I would have to do it alone. I pulled out my laptop, opening the application for the FinTech Accelerator, my fingers flying over the keys as I answered questions about my mission, my plan, my why. Because I needed to prove to myself that I was worth something, even if the Whitmores never saw it. I hit submit just as the clock on the wall hit midnight, the screen flashing. "Your application has been received." Behind me, Noah sat silent, the space between us heavier than ever, and neither of us knew that his silence would come at a cost none of us were ready to pay. Noah didn't say a word that night. He slept on the couch while I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what we had become pressing into my chest. In the morning, I made coffee, the bitter scent grounding me as I planned my next steps. I had one goal now: get into that accelerator, build my platform, help women like me gain financial freedom. I couldn't let Evelyn or anyone else decide what I was worth. Noah came into the kitchen, hair messy, eyes tired. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "I can't do this right now, Noah," I said, my voice quiet but firm. He nodded, pressing his lips together, grabbing his coat before heading out the door. The door closed softly, but it felt like a slam. Days passed, the cold New York wind biting as I worked my shifts at the bank, studying at the library during lunch breaks, and spending late nights researching credit systems and community banking laws. I received the email I had been praying for on a Wednesday night, the header glowing on my cracked screen. "Congratulations. You have been accepted into the Rise Up FinTech Accelerator." I let out a breath, tears welling, but I blinked them away. I wasn't going to let this chance slip. The program was tough, but it was the first place where people saw me for my ideas, not my background. I pitched my vision to mentors, worked on prototypes with other founders, and stayed up until dawn fixing bugs in the system I was building. Every night, I returned to our small apartment, exhausted but alive, while Noah's absence grew louder. He was working longer hours or so, he said, coming home late, quietly slipping into bed without a word. One night, I found him sitting in the dark living room, still in his suit, staring at the floor. "Are you okay?" I asked, dropping my bag. He looked up, his eyes red. "They gave me an ultimatum, Sienna." I swallowed. "Who, my parents?" he whispered, voice cracking. "They said I have to leave you or they'll cut me off. The trust, the partnership at the firm, everything." I felt the air leave the room, the words echoing. "And what did you say?" I asked, my voice calm even though my heart thundered in my chest. He stood pacing, running his hands through his hair. "I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say." I laughed, a small bitter sound. "You didn't know what to say, Sienna. You don't understand." "No, Noah, you don't understand," I snapped, stepping forward. "I have spent my whole life fighting to be seen, to be heard, to survive. You think I don't understand what it's like to have to choose?" He stopped, breathing hard, staring at me. "What do you want me to do?" I shook my head. "I want you to choose." He sank back onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I turned away, walking to the window, looking out at the streetlights flickering in the cold wind. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if love was enough to cross a world built on privilege and power. The next night, I came home late from the accelerator, the wind cutting through my thin coat as I climbed the stairs. I opened the door and found Noah on his knees in the middle of the living room. He looked up, tears streaming down his face, his hands trembling. "I choose you, Sienna," he whispered. I dropped my bag, my heart stopping. "Noah, I told them I'm done," he said, choking on the words. I walked away from the trust, from the job, from everything. I can't keep living in their world, not if it means losing you. I sank to the floor, tears blurring my vision as he reached for my hands. "We'll figure this out together," he said, pressing his forehead to mine. "Even if we have nothing, I'd rather have nothing with you than everything without you." We held each other there, the world outside cold and uncaring, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Because he chose me. But I didn't know then that his choice would cost us more than we ever imagined. What would you have done if you were me? Have you ever faced a choice like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because the storm his choice unleashed was only just beginning. They didn't know when they laughed at me I was quietly building an empire from a one-bedroom apartment. After Noah walked away from his family's fortune, we moved into a tiny studio in Queens. The floors creaked when we walked, and the radiator clanged every night like it was fighting for its last breath. But it was ours. We pushed the mattress into the corner and set up a folding table against the wall. I bought whiteboards from a clearance sale, scribbling ideas, sketches of wireframes, and lists of what Equal Path could become. Equal Path. That name felt like a promise every time I whispered it. A fintech platform for women like me. For single mothers, immigrants, people who never learned about credit because no one took the time to teach them. A system that would give them the tools to build, not just survive. Noah worked part-time at a small accounting firm, making just enough to cover rent and cheap groceries. At night, he sat beside me crunching numbers, building financial models while I sketched the app design on scraps of paper, our laptops balanced on our knees. We lived on instant noodles, dollar pizza slices, and the coffee I brewed in a dented French press at 5 a.m. before starting another day. Some nights exhaustion hit me so hard I fell asleep with my laptop open, lines of code and grant application drafts blurring into dreams of what could be. But the rejections came fast. 53 investors told me no. Some said I was too inexperienced. Some said the market was too small. Others didn't even look me in the eye during pitches, dismissing me before I opened my mouth. I would close my laptop, crawl into bed beside Noah, and stare at the ceiling, tears silently falling as I wondered if they were right. Noah would wrap his arm around me, pulling me close. "Don't give up," he would whisper. "I don't know if I can do this," I would whisper back. "Yes, you can," he would say, pressing his forehead against mine. "They don't see you, but I do." One night the fridge was empty, the credit card maxed, and I had to decide between paying for the website domain or buying groceries. I stood in the kitchen, the glow of the open fridge, lighting my face, hunger gnawing in my stomach as I pulled out my phone. I called the lawyer who handled my grandmother's estate in Detroit. "I need to sell the land," I said, my voice steady. There was a pause on the line. "Are you sure, Sienna, that land was important to her?" "I'm sure," I said, swallowing hard. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen, clutching the counter, letting myself cry for 5 minutes before wiping my face and returning to the whiteboard. I didn't tell Noah until the paperwork was signed. He came home from work, the evening light catching the lines of exhaustion on his face. I handed him the check. "What is this?" he asked. "I sold Grandma's land," I said, my voice even. He shook his head, eyes wide. "Sienna, we needed it," I interrupted. "And I need this to work." He looked at me for a long moment, then pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could feel his heart racing against mine. "I promise you," he whispered, "this will not be in vain." I closed my eyes, pressing my face into his shoulder, letting myself believe it for a moment. We deposited the check the next morning, paying off the credit card, renewing the domain, and buying 2 bags of groceries that felt like a feast. At night, I would trace the lines on the whiteboard, reminding myself why I was doing this. Reminding myself that I would rather fail on my terms than let the world tell me I was nothing. Because Equal Path was more than an app. It was a promise. And I wasn't going to break it. We kept building. Every morning before sunrise, I ran 2 miles around the block to clear my head, breathing in the cold air that smelled like wet concrete and cheap coffee drifting from bodegas opening for the day. I would shower quickly, pull on the same pair of jeans, and sit cross-legged on the floor, laptop on my knees, updating wireframes and user flows. Noah would leave for his part-time job with a thermos of coffee, kissing my forehead before he closed the door, always whispering the same thing. "We're going to make it, Sienna." And I would nod even on the mornings I felt like I was drowning. Equal Path's first prototype was clunky, but it worked. It tracked spending, taught credit basics, and offered goal-setting tools for women who had never learned how to budget because they were too busy surviving. I met with community leaders at local churches, presenting Equal Path to single mothers and immigrant families in small basement rooms that smelled like burnt coffee and cleaning supplies. They listened, they asked questions, and they signed up. They didn't care that I wasn't polished. They didn't care that I didn't have investors backing me yet. They cared that I was trying to build something for them. But the money was always tight. The little we had went to hosting fees, app security, and marketing flyers I printed at the corner shop. Noah and I shared one cracked iPhone to test updates, switching it between us with charger cords trailing behind like lifelines. Some nights I cried into a towel in the bathroom, running the faucet so Noah wouldn't hear me. I felt like I was asking too much of him, of myself, of the universe. But every time I opened Equal Path and saw another sign up, another woman trying to build a life for herself, I wiped my face and kept going. We pitched to investors. Over and over. Some meetings were in sleek offices with glass walls overlooking Manhattan, where men in suits scrolled their phones as I spoke. Others were in coffee shops where investors ordered lattes they didn't finish before telling me it was too niche or too risky. I would thank them for their time, walk out, and let myself feel the sting for 5 minutes before taking the subway back to Queens, forcing myself to believe the right person would say yes. Noah would wait for me with takeout containers from the cheap Chinese place down the block, pulling me into his arms as I walked in, telling me how proud he was. "You're building something real," he would say. "They just don't see it yet." One Friday night, after another rejection email, I closed my laptop, sliding it under the couch. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees to my chest, staring at the string lights we hung on the wall to make the apartment feel less empty. Noah sat down beside me, leaning his head against mine. "Are we crazy?" I asked. "Probably," he said, a soft laugh in his voice. "Maybe I should stop," I whispered. He pulled back, looking me in the eye. "Do you want to stop?" I shook my head, tears filling my eyes. "Number. Then we don't stop," he said, squeezing my hand. And we didn't. Late one night, while Noah snored softly in bed, I sat on the floor with my laptop, sending out one last cold email to a venture fund run by women of color in Brooklyn. My hands shook as I hit send, the screen blinking once before going dark, the battery dying. I closed my eyes, pressing the laptop to my chest, praying that someone would finally believe in what we were building. At 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. An email notification lit up the screen, the subject line making my breath catch. "Let's talk. Tomorrow." And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. Have you ever risked everything for a dream no one else could see? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because that email was the beginning of a storm I didn't see coming. An investor finally saw my potential, but the enemy smelled success too. Her name was Danielle Brooks, a 40-year-old venture capitalist from Brooklyn, sharp eyes and a smile that told you she missed nothing. She met me at a coffee shop in Harlem, leaning back in her chair, tapping her nails against her cup as I pitched Equal Path with trembling hands. When I finished, she didn't blink, she just nodded once. $5 million for 15%, she said, sliding her card across the table. Think about it. I sat there, heart-pounding, fingers tracing the edges of her card. Danielle was exactly the kind of investor I had dreamed of, someone who understood why Equal Path mattered, someone who wouldn't try to control the mission for profit alone. I called Noah from the sidewalk, the city buzzing around me. "She said yes," I whispered. On the other end, I heard his breath catch, then his laugh, warm and relieved. "You did it, Sienna." "No," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "We did it." The paperwork moved fast. Within weeks, we moved out of our tiny studio into a small office space in Long Island City, paint still drying on the walls as we set up borrowed desks and folding chairs. Equal Path exploded. TikTok videos about credit hacks and budgeting using our app went viral, our DMs flooding with women asking how to start, how to save, how to break the chains of debt. We hit 200,000 users in 6 months, each sign up a reminder of why I had started this. Noah handled the financial operations, staying up late to manage growth plans, while I worked with developers and community partners building content that mattered. We hired a small team, young and hungry, believing in the mission. For a moment, it felt like we were unstoppable. But success is noisy, and it attracts the wrong kind of attention. Preston Group, a massive financial conglomerate, started noticing Equal Path. They saw our user growth, our niche market, the way we were eating into the payday lenders and high-interest credit products they pushed into vulnerable communities. Rumors started swirling that Preston had connections with the Whitmore family, whispers of deals that had strings attached, old alliances in back rooms. One night I stayed late at the office, the glow of my laptop lighting the dark room as I answered user emails, helping a single mother in Newark set up her budget, a college student in Atlanta manage her credit card payments. I didn't see it coming. At 2:11 a.m., my phone lit up with notifications, hundreds at once, flooding the screen. "What's going on?" Noah shouted from the kitchen, rushing in as I opened the app. The user dashboard was blank. Data wiped, accounts locked, customer emails exposed, names and addresses hanging in the open like wounds. A hack. A deliberate, targeted attack. I felt my knees buckle, the chair scraping back as I sank to the floor, hands in my hair, the world spinning as the notifications kept coming. Noah pulled me into his arms, but I barely felt it, my mind screaming with every user who trusted me, every promise I had made. We worked through the night, calling the engineers, locking down the systems, sending out emails to users explaining what happened, promising them we would fix it. The next morning, headlines splashed across finance sites. Equal Path breaches your data safe. Sienna Carter's fintech startup faces major security failure. My face, tired and pale, was plastered under those words, mocking me. I stood in the office kitchen, clutching a cold cup of coffee while Noah read through the articles, his jaw clenched. "Preston did this," he said. I nodded, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. "They want to kill us before we grow bigger." Noah set down his phone, stepping closer. "What are you going to do?" I looked at him, my hands shaking, my mind clear for the first time in hours. "I'm going to tell the truth," I said. And I meant it. I went live that night. I sat at my desk in the dark office, the glow of the ring light reflecting in my tired eyes as I opened TikTok and Instagram, hands trembling as I pressed go live. "Hi everyone." I started, my voice steady even as my heart pounded in my chest. "I'm Sienna Carter, founder of Equal Path, and tonight I want to talk to you directly." I explained everything. The hack, the breach, the sleepless nights trying to protect their data, the way we locked down systems and brought in security teams, how we were offering credit monitoring for every single user free until we fixed every hole. I took questions live, answering them one by one. "I trusted you," a comment popped up. "I know," I said, blinking back tears. "And I will earn that trust again." Thousands watched, hearts and comments flooding in. "You are the only reason I started budgeting. Your app helped me leave an abusive situation. Don't give up, Sienna." The notifications kept coming, and I let them pour into me, each message a reminder of why Equal Path existed. After I ended the live, I leaned back in my chair, breathing hard, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. Noah stepped out from the hallway, his eyes glassy, his jaw set with pride. "You did it," he said. I shook my head, wiping my face with the sleeve of my sweatshirt. "We're not done yet." Over the next few weeks, we rebuilt. Danielle Brooks stood by us, helping fund a top-tier cybersecurity firm to audit every line of code. We sent out weekly updates to users, showing them exactly what we were fixing. Slowly, people started coming back. Signups returned, shares on TikTok picked up again, and emails from users poured in thanking us for being honest when it would have been easier to hide. The pain was still there, but it was now mixed with hope, a quiet, pulsing reminder that vulnerability is not weakness. One morning, as I was sorting through user support tickets, a knock came at the office door. Noah glanced at me, eyebrows raised before walking over to open it. I looked up, the words on my screen blurring as Evelyn Whitmore stepped into our small office. She was dressed in a dark coat, pearls around her neck, eyes scanning the room with thinly veiled judgment. Evelyn, Noah said, his voice flat, stepping between us. "I'm here to speak with Sienna," she said, her voice cool. I stood slowly, closing my laptop, meeting her gaze. "What do you want?" I asked. She smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "I have a proposition for you," she said, stepping further into the room, ignoring Noah's outstretched hand to stop her. "This isn't a good time," Noah snapped. Evelyn turned her gaze to her son, eyes narrowing. "You have no idea how much you've given up, Noah." He clenched his jaw. "I know exactly what I've given up." She turned back to me, her smile returning. "I think it's time we discuss your future, Sienna." And his. The room felt cold, the hum of the heater suddenly too loud in the silence that followed. I crossed my arms, keeping my voice calm. "Say what you came to say." Evelyn's eyes glittered. "Your company is growing, but you lack the infrastructure to compete with the big players. I'm offering to help. Funding, connections, protection. And in return," I asked. She tilted her head, her smile turning sharp. "You walk away from Noah. Quietly, cleanly. You focus on your company, and we will ensure your success." Noah stepped forward, his face red, but I lifted my hand, stopping him. Evelyn's gaze stayed locked on mine, daring me to speak. And in that moment, I realized this was never about protecting Noah. It was about control. It was about taking what I had built and turning it into something she could own. Something she could use. What would you have done if you were me? Have you ever faced someone trying to buy your future? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because I was about to show Evelyn Whitmore exactly who she was dealing with. My mother-in-law tried to buy my silence with $10 million. She came back to the office a week later, this time, with a contract in hand, sliding it across the table like it was a gift, not a threat. $10 million, Sienna, Evelyn said, crossing her legs, her diamond bracelet catching the morning light. "No strings, just an investment in Equal Path to help you scale." I didn't touch the paper. "And what do you want in return?" I asked, even though I already knew. Evelyn's smile was soft, practiced. "Your promise to leave Noah. To leave quietly. To let him come back home without this distraction." I felt heat rising in my chest, my fingers digging into the arms of the chair. She didn't flinch, just waited, confident I would crumble under the weight of the offer. I thought of the weeks we spent eating dollar pizza slices, the nights I cried on the bathroom floor, wondering if we would lose everything, the long hours Noah worked to keep us afloat. She wanted to erase all of that. Erase me. I built Equal Path from nothing. I said, my voice steady even as my heart pounded. "You think you can buy it? Buy me just to kill it." Her smile slipped for a second before returning colder. "You don't understand how this world works, Sienna. You're fighting a battle you can't win." "I'd rather fight than sell my soul to you," I snapped. She stood, collecting the contract, sliding it back into her designer bag. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said, rising to meet her gaze. "You are." She left without another word, the door closing softly, but the tension in the room felt like it could crack the walls. Noah came in moments later, his eyes searching mine. "What did she say?" I swallowed, trying to push down the tears stinging my eyes. "She offered $10 million to make me leave you." His jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "And you said?" I said. "No," I whispered. Noah pulled me into his arms, pressing his forehead to mine. "I'm sorry she keeps doing this." "She's scared," I said, pulling back to look at him. "Because she knows we're winning." But we didn't have time to celebrate. A week later, we received a cease and desist letter from Preston Group accusing Equal Path of violating a patent they claimed to own. They demanded we shut down or pay a settlement we couldn't afford. "They're bluffing," Noah said, pacing the office. "They want to scare us into selling." I looked at him, fear tightening in my chest. "And if they're not? If we fight and lose, we lose everything." Noah stopped, turning to me, his eyes fierce. "I'd rather lose everything than watch them take what you built." I sank into the chair, exhaustion crashing over me, but his words sparked something inside me. A reminder of why we started. Why we fought. I opened my laptop, pulling up the Equal Path site. Then we fight back, I said. How? He asked, stepping closer. We open it, I said, looking up at him. We make Equal Path's tools free for everyone everywhere. We launch Number Financial Freedom, and we let the world see what we're doing. Noah's face broke into a small, tired smile. You're insane. Maybe, I said, returning the smile. But I'm right. We spent the next few days preparing, rewriting code, creating new content, recording videos explaining how to use Equal Path, how to take control of your money, how to fight back against a system designed to keep you in debt. We planned the launch for Monday morning, the day Preston would expect us to break. But Sunday night, as I was finalizing the launch post, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, and when I answered, the world shifted. Is this Sienna Carter? A voice asked. Yes, I said, fear crawling up my spine. This is New York Presbyterian. Your husband, Noah Whitmore, has been in an accident. We need you to come immediately. The phone slipped from my hand, the room spinning as the words echoed in my head. Noah. Accident. Immediately. What would you have done if you were me? Have you ever faced a moment where everything hung by a thread? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because I didn't know if I was about to lose everything I loved in one night. The cab ride to the hospital felt like it would never end. I pressed my forehead against the cold window, watching the lights of the city smear into streaks as we sped through red lights. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. Noah. Please let him be okay. The ER was bright, too bright, the smell of antiseptic and coffee hanging heavy in the air. I rushed to the front desk, my voice shaking. I'm looking for Noah Whitmore. He was in an accident. The nurse glanced at her screen, nodded once. He's stable. They're running tests now. Stable. The word was a lifeline, but it didn't stop my hands from shaking as I signed forms and followed her down a hallway that smelled like bleach and fear. When I saw him, a wave of relief nearly dropped me to my knees. He was lying on the bed, a cut on his forehead stitched his arm in a sling, eyes closed but breathing steady. Noah, I whispered, stepping closer, reaching for his hand. His eyes fluttered open, and when he saw me, a small, tired smile broke across his face. Hey, he croaked, his voice raspy. Don't you ever scare me like that again, I said, tears slipping down my cheeks. He squeezed my hand weakly. I'm okay. What happened? I asked. They said I was hit by a car, he said, wincing as he shifted. Driver ran a red light, but in his eyes I saw the fear, the doubt. We both knew this was no accident. I sat beside him, holding his hand, resting my head against the side of the bed. The monitors beeped softly, the world narrowing down to the rise and fall of his chest. Hours passed before they discharged him, and I helped him into another cab, guiding him up the stairs to our small apartment, ignoring the pain in my own body as I steadied him. He sat on the couch, eyes closing, breathing deeply. We can stop, Sienna, he whispered. We can walk away. I shook my head, kneeling in front of him. You didn't leave your family's money and name for us to quit now. His eyes opened, locking onto mine. But what if they come for you next? Let them try, I said, my voice calm. I won't let them take what we built. His hand cupped my cheek, rough and warm. You're stronger than all of them. I leaned into his touch, letting that truth fill me even as fear twisted in my stomach. We spent the next few days recovering, Noah moving slower but still reviewing numbers, still beside me as we prepped the launch of Number Financial Freedom. I recorded a video explaining what Equal Path was about, why we were making the tools free, why it mattered. Noah filmed it from the couch, the camera shaking slightly, but it didn't matter. It was real. When we posted it, it exploded. People shared it, commented, thanked us. Women from Atlanta, Detroit, Oakland, Queens saying they finally felt seen, saying they wanted to learn to build, to grow. Preston's threats were still there, but so was the power of a community that was tired of being ignored. Late one night, Noah was asleep, breathing softly beside me when my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made my breath catch. Urgent, Preston Group lawsuit filed. I sat there, the glow of the screen lighting my face, the city silent outside the window. They were coming for us, and this time it was official. Have you ever faced a moment where you knew the fight was just beginning? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because I was ready to fight no matter what it cost me. I thought I was strong until I saw Noah lying in that hospital bed. His skin was pale against the white sheets, an oxygen tube taped under his nose, bruises painting his arms and chest. Machines beeped softly each sound, reminding me he was still here, still breathing. They told me it was a car accident, a driver running a red light. But deep down I knew. Noah had been getting strange calls since leaving his family's company. Cars parked outside our building with tinted windows. People who looked away too quickly when I caught them staring. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I had nothing. No proof, just fear curling in my stomach. I sat beside him, my hand wrapped around his, feeling the warmth, the steady pulse under my fingers. "Please," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Don't leave me, Noah." The nurse came in, checking the machines, adjusting the IV. She gave me a small, tired smile before stepping out, leaving us alone in the room that smelled like antiseptic and cold air. I rested my forehead on the edge of the bed, closing my eyes, trying to breathe. The memory of Grandma's voice came back to me, soft but fierce. "Build something no one can take from you." I remembered how she would sit at the kitchen table in our tiny Detroit apartment, counting out bills, showing me how to save $1 when we barely had $2. I stood wiping my face, looking at Noah's still form. I couldn't let them win. They wanted me to be afraid, to quit, to walk away before Equal Path grew too big, too powerful. I walked out of the hospital room into the hallway where the fluorescent lights buzzed and pulled out my phone. I called Danielle Brooks. "We're opening the platform," I said before I could lose the courage. She was silent for a beat. "Are you sure, Sienna? They want to bury us," I said, gripping the phone tight. "We're going to make it impossible." She let out a breath. "I'll get the legal team ready." I hung up and walked down the hallway, each step steady, each breath deeper. If Preston wanted a fight, I would give them one. But it would be on my terms. I spent the next 72 hours building the plan. I barely left the hospital, working from the small chair beside Noah's bed, charging my laptop from the outlet by the IV pump. Nurses moved around me, checking charts while I drafted emails and coded updates. Equal Path would go open source for low-income users. No barriers, no paywalls, nothing Preston could buy or bury. We would keep premium services for those who could pay, funding the platform for everyone else. If they wanted to drown us in lawsuits, we would drown them in public support. Danielle pulled strings, connecting us with nonprofit financial groups and legal aid organizations across the country. I signed paperwork on the edge of Noah's bed while he lay unconscious, his breathing steady but too quiet. When I felt the fear rising, I would look at him, remember why we started, remember what we promised. No one would take this away from us. News broke fast. Equal Path goes open source to fight back. Startup founder challenges Preston Group. People shared the story, tagging us with financial freedom, voices rising to drown out the silence Preston tried to force on us. Then the lawsuit came. Federal court, a thick envelope dropped at the hospital front desk, accusing Equal Path of patent infringement, demanding damages that would bankrupt us 3 times over. I sat in the hospital cafeteria, the envelope in my lap, the smell of burnt coffee and old fries heavy in the air. I opened it, read each line, letting the fear settle before folding it back neatly. I called Danielle. "They filed," I said. "Let them," she replied, her voice sharp. "We're ready." That night I held Noah's hand, the monitors beeping softly, the glow of the city lights flickering outside the window. "Grandma," I whispered, "I'm doing what you said. I'm building something they can't take." Tears slipped down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. Because this was what fighting looked like. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Noah shifting, his fingers twitching in mine. I shot up, leaning over him, hope and fear clashing in my chest. His eyes opened slowly, blinking against the morning light, focusing on me. "Hey," he croaked, his voice rough but alive. I let out a breath, a laugh breaking through the tears. "Hey." His fingers squeezed mine, weak but certain. "You didn't stop, did you?" "No," I whispered, pressing my forehead to his. "And I won't." He smiled, small but real, his eyes shining even in the harsh hospital light. "Good," he said. "Show them who you are." I kissed his forehead, letting that moment burn into me, a promise sealed between us, because I had told him once that they would see us, and now I would make sure they did. Have you ever had to stand your ground when the world tried to break you? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because the day was coming when they would have to bow their heads and watch us rise. The day Noah woke up, I promised him they would see us win. I left the hospital that morning, the cold air slapping my face as I walked down the steps, the sky over Manhattan gray and heavy. I could barely feel my legs, but I kept moving. Equal Path was still under siege. I had meetings lined up with legal teams, calls with Danielle, interviews with local media who wanted to cover our story. I answered questions outside the courthouse, cameras flashing, reporters shoving microphones in my face. Are you worried about losing everything? I looked into the camera, letting them see the exhaustion, the fire, the promise. We're not backing down, I said. At night, I returned to Noah's side, showing him the progress, the articles, the thousands of messages pouring in from women across the country. This is yours too, I told him, brushing a hand over his hair. His eyes filled with tears, and he squeezed my hand, too weak to say more, but I saw everything I needed in his eyes. One evening, I pulled out Grandma's photo from my wallet, the one of her standing in front of her tiny Detroit apartment, hands on her hips, chin lifted. Thank you, I whispered. She taught me to fight quietly, to keep going when no one was watching. Now the world was watching. Preston's lawyers tried to drown us with paperwork, intimidation, calls, threats of damages that would bankrupt us. But the more they pushed, the louder people shouted for us online. Financial freedom trended for days, women sharing stories of leaving abusive homes because they learned to save, families finally building credit, immigrants opening their first savings accounts. Equal Path became more than an app. It became a movement. On the morning of our federal court hearing, I dressed in the same thrift store blazer I wore the day I met Noah. I straightened it in the mirror, took a deep breath, and left for the courthouse. Danielle met me at the steps, her eyes fierce. Ready. As I'll ever be, I said. Inside, the courtroom smelled of old wood and stale air. The judge, a middle-aged black woman with kind but sharp eyes, took her seat. Preston's lawyers argued their case with polished words, waving their patents and projections, claiming we had stolen their work. When it was my turn, I stood, palms sweating, heart pounding. Your Honor, I began. Equal Path was built to help people who have never been given a chance. We aren't stealing. We are creating something the system has always denied them. I lifted my chin, letting every woman who ever felt small see me. I won't let them bury us. After the hearing, I stepped outside, the cold air biting as cameras flashed. Reporters asked for statements, but I just smiled. We're still standing, I said. That night, I returned to the hospital, climbing into the chair beside Noah, resting my head on the edge of his bed. We did it, I whispered. No matter what happens, we showed them. His hand moved slow but sure, finding mine, squeezing once. I knew you would, he murmured, his voice rough but alive. And as I watched the lights of the city flicker outside the window, I felt it. We were just getting started. Have you ever fought for something everyone said you couldn't win? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because tomorrow, the real battle would begin. They didn't know when I walked away with nothing. I swore I would return and silence them with my success. 3 years had passed since I stood in that dining room, Evelyn Whitmore's laughter cutting through me, Noah sitting quietly, shame burning in his eyes. Now I was the CEO of Equal Path, leading a company with 2 million users, empowering women and families to reclaim financial control. We had closed a $50 million Series C round led by top venture funds, with Danielle Brooks standing beside me through every late-night strategy call and every battle with Preston. And today I was going back. The Whitmore family's summer reunion was held at their estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, the same sprawling property with manicured lawns and a driveway lined with black cars. But this time I wasn't taking the train, clutching a worn leather bag, praying they would see me. This time I arrived in a helicopter. We landed at a private helipad 200 meters from the estate, the FAA-approved landing area rented for the day. The wind from the blades caught my hair as I stepped down in a tailored dark green suit, the fabric hugging my frame, heels clicking against the concrete with every step I took toward the waiting car. Danielle stepped out behind me, sunglasses hiding the pride in her eyes. You ready? She asked, smirking. I nodded, adjusting the gold necklace Grandma left me. Always. The car pulled up to the estate, the Whitmore's staff scrambling to direct us toward the gathering on the back lawn. Music floated through the air, the clinking of glasses, the scent of grilled steaks mixing with expensive perfume. I stepped out and silence followed. Heads turned, conversations paused, forks froze halfway to mouths. Evelyn Whitmore stood by the table, a glass of champagne in her manicured hand, eyes widening before she masked it with a tight smile. Richard Whitmore, standing beside her, stiffened, his eyes flickering between me and Noah, who was stepping out behind me, his hand resting on my lower back. Noah wore a simple gray suit, his expression calm, no longer the boy torn between his mother and his wife. I scanned the crowd, cousins and aunts staring, whispers breaking out like the rustle of dry leaves. Richard stepped forward first, clearing his throat, extending his hand. Sienna. I looked at it for a moment before taking it, his grip firm but trembling. Richard, I said, nodding once. Evelyn approached, her smile, sharp eyes glinting. We're glad you could make it. I tilted my head, meeting her gaze. Are you? She opened her mouth, then closed it, swallowing before she forced a laugh. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I didn't come here for you. She blinked, her facade cracking. I turned, letting my eyes sweep across the lawn, taking in every face, every curious glance. I didn't do this to prove anything to you, I said, my voice carrying enough for everyone to hear. I did this to spite you. Danielle smiled behind her glass, watching the family shift uncomfortably. Noah slipped his hand into mine, squeezing once, his eyes shining with pride. And as I looked around, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders, the years of doubt and struggle dissolving under the truth of this moment. I had returned not for their approval, but to show myself that I was never small. I turned back to Evelyn, who stood frozen, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. But I wasn't there to listen. Because revenge was only the beginning, and I needed something bigger to make them remember me forever. I walked across the lawn, each step sinking softly into the trimmed grass, the summer breeze lifting strands of my hair. Aunt Caroline tried to smile at me, her hand clutching a glass of rosé, her eyes darting to Evelyn as if seeking permission to speak. I nodded politely, but I didn't slow down. Noah stayed close, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, his calm presence grounding me. We moved through the gathering like a quiet storm, their curious eyes following us, whispers rising behind our shoulders. Children ran by, laughter ringing in the air, so unaware of the weight pressing on their parents as they watched us. Danielle stepped beside me, slipping off her sunglasses, her grin wide. They look like they've seen a ghost. I let out a soft breath, a small smile pulling at my lips. Good. We reached the table under the white canopy where Richard and Evelyn stood together, their carefully arranged expressions cracking at the edges. Would you like a drink? Richard asked, clearing his throat, reaching for a bottle of wine. No thank you, I replied, meeting his gaze. I won't be staying long. He swallowed, setting the bottle down, his hand trembling just slightly. Evelyn stepped forward, forcing her smile. You've certainly made a name for yourself, Sienna. I tilted my head, looking her in the eye. No, Evelyn. I made a path for others. That's the difference. Her lips twitched, her eyes narrowing, but she didn't respond. I turned to the crowd, letting my voice carry. I didn't come here for your approval or your praise. I came here to remind myself of who I was when I first stood on this lawn. And who I am now. Silence fell, a heavy hush that settled over the party like a blanket. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small card, handing it to Evelyn. This is for you. She looked down, her perfectly manicured nails pinching the edge as she read it. Equal Path Foundation. Community Investment Fund. Her eyes snapped up, confusion and fear flickering before she masked it again. What is this? The next step, I said, my voice calm. We're launching a fund to support minority-owned businesses and women entrepreneurs across the country. Real legacy, not the kind that sits in trust funds. Richard's eyes widened, his mouth opening, but no words came out. Noah slipped his arm around my waist, pressing a kiss to my temple. You ready? He asked softly. I nodded, turning to Danielle, who was already pulling out her phone, recording the moment. I looked back at Evelyn, letting my eyes hold hers. I didn't do this to prove anything to you. I did this to spite you. And with that I turned, walking back across the grass, each step lighter than the last. As we reached the car, the helicopter blades began to spin again in the distance, kicking up a warm breeze that lifted the hem of my suit jacket. I paused, looking back one last time. They stood there stunned, small in the distance, their world no longer the center of mine. Noah squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with pride. Let's go home. I smiled, slipping into the car, the door closing with a quiet finality. But as the helicopter lifted off the estate shrinking below us, I knew this wasn't the end. Because revenge was only the beginning. And now it was time to build something they could never tear down. Have you ever dreamed of a moment like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because what came next would change everything. They thought I came back just for revenge, but I came to build a legacy. We launched the Equal Future Fund on a cold morning in Detroit, standing on the same block where Grandma's apartment once stood, the same ground she walked to catch the bus, to work, the same street where she taught me to count coins to buy milk. Now that street would host the Equal Future Community Finance Center, a place where women like me could learn how to build credit, save, invest, and start businesses without begging banks that never wanted them to succeed. I stepped up to the podium, the wind whipping around the tent. We set up, the Detroit skyline rising behind me. Cameras flashed, news outlets live streaming the moment. Noah stood in the front row, a soft brace still on his arm, but his smile steady, proud. Danielle was beside him, arms crossed, eyes bright. I gripped the edges of the podium, letting my eyes scan the crowd of women, men, young girls holding their mothers' hands, local leaders, and volunteers. Today isn't about me, I began, my voice carrying across the lot. It's about every woman who has ever been told she isn't enough, every mother who has skipped meals so her kids could eat, every daughter who is taught to shrink herself to fit a world too small for her dreams. I paused, letting the silence hold. Legacy is not what you keep, it's what you give away. Applause broke out, some people cheering, others wiping tears from their cheeks. Behind them, construction crews moved, laying the foundation for the center, the sound of hammers and drills like a promise that this was real, that it would last. Later that afternoon, as I signed agreements with the Detroit City Council to provide microloans and scholarships through Equal Future, my phone buzzed. It was Evelyn. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering, stepping away to the side of the lot where the cold air bit at my face. Sienna, she said, her voice careful, measured. Evelyn, I replied, keeping my tone even. We'd like to meet, she said. Richard and I. I waited. She cleared her throat. Whitmore Investments would like to explore a partnership with Equal Future. I let out a breath, watching it fog in the cold air. Why now? There was a pause on the line before she spoke again, softer this time. Because we need to do better. I closed my eyes, the moment heavy, knowing what this meant. They were coming, but this time it would be on my terms. We met at a small cafe off Woodward, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and the scent of roasted beans hanging thick in the air. Evelyn and Richard walked in, both dressed in dark coats, the cold January wind still clinging to them as they sat across from me. Evelyn folded her hands on the table, her wedding ring catching the light. Sienna, thank you for meeting us. I stirred my coffee, letting the silence stretch before answering. Why are you really here? Richard shifted, clearing his throat. Whitmore Investments is facing challenges. Public perception has changed. We want to be part of something that matters. Evelyn nodded, her eyes locking on mine. We want to invest in Equal Future. I leaned back, studying them, remembering the way Evelyn once looked at me like I was dirt on her shoes. Remembering the nights Noah and I slept on an air mattress, scraping by while they lived comfortably, pretending we didn't exist. You can't buy your way into this, I said, my voice calm. Richard opened his mouth, but Evelyn raised a hand, stopping him. We don't want to control it, we want to support it. I let out a breath, tapping my fingers against the mug. If you want in, it's on my terms. Full transparency. Public commitment to community investment. You will not hide behind this to cover your mistakes. Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she nodded once. Agreed. I looked between them, letting the weight of the moment settle, knowing this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about building something bigger than all of us. Then let's get to work, I said. A week later, Noah and I stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Equal Future Community Finance Center. He was strong again, his arm around my waist, his smile steady as cameras flashed. Danielle stood on my other side, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder as I stepped forward, the giant scissors in my hands glinting under the winter sun. I looked out at the crowd, hundreds gathered from local families to city officials, reporters, and volunteers. And I saw Evelyn and Richard standing near the back, not in the front, not taking the spotlight but watching. I raised the scissors, the ribbon taut. Legacy. I said, letting the word hang in the air is something they can never take. I cut the ribbon, the crowd erupting in cheers, as the doors swung open, welcoming the first families into a place built for them, by them, with no strings, no judgment, only opportunity. That night, I stood on the roof of the center, looking up at the sky, the cold air biting at my cheeks, the lights of Detroit blinking softly below. A helicopter flew overhead, its lights sweeping across the building, but I didn't look away. I didn't need to leave to prove anything anymore. I had landed. And I was here to change the game. Have you ever felt the moment you stopped needing their approval? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because this was only the beginning.